For 15 years, my world was small. It was the size of a 7 by 10 foot room in a shared apartment in Queens, a room whose window looked out onto a brick wall. It was the smell of industrial strength cleaner that clung to my clothes and the ache in my lower back that never quite went away. My world was the hum of the F train rattling beneath my feet on my way to clean offices in Manhattan, long after the important people had gone home, leaving behind the ghosts of their busy lives in overflowing trash cans and coffee-stained desks. Every day was a mirror of the one before. Wake up, eat a small meal, take the train, scrub floors, wipe down surfaces, take the train back, sleep. But that wasn't my real world. My real world, the one I lived in inside my head, was thousands of miles away. It was a world filled with the sound of my son's laughter, a sound I could only remember from when he was 4 years old. It was the warmth of a sun I hadn't felt on my skin in over a decade, and the taste of mangoes from the tree in my mother's old yard. My purpose was simple, singular, and it burned in me like a pilot light. Give my son, Raphael, the life I never had. Everything I did was for him. Every dollar, minus the bare minimum I needed for rent and instant noodles, was bundled and sent back home. That money wasn't just paper. It was my love made tangible. It was school uniforms I would never see him wear, birthday presents I would never watch him open, nutritious food I would never cook for him. It was my physical presence, converted into currency. I sacrificed my youth, my health, my life, so that he could have a better one. I spoke to him on the phone every Sunday. In the beginning, his little voice was a chirping bird, telling me about a new friend or a scraped knee. As he got older, the calls became shorter. His voice deepened. The conversations turned to requests: a new pair of sneakers, a video game console, a better phone. I never said no. How could I? Saying no felt like a failure, like admitting that the miles between us were too great. My husband, Marco, would tell me how proud Raphael was of me, how he told all his friends his mom worked in America. I clung to those words. They were the fuel that got me through the lonely nights and the grueling shifts. I imagined our reunion constantly. It was a movie I played in my head on a loop. I would have saved enough money to build a small, beautiful house. I would arrive, not as a cleaner with calloused hands, but as a hero. Raphael, a tall, strong young man, would see me at the airport gate, and his eyes would fill with tears. He would run to me, wrap his arms around me, and say, "Welcome home, Mom. I missed you so much." That image was my North Star. It was the reason for everything. After 15 years, the day finally came. My body was tired. I had new lines on my face and gray in my hair, but my spirit was soaring. I had enough. Enough for the house, enough to start a small business, enough to finally go home and be a mother again. The plane ride was an agony of anticipation. I couldn't sleep. I just stared out the window at the clouds, my heart pounding with every mile we crossed. I had 2 oversized suitcases filled with gifts. A laptop for Raphael, designer clothes I'd bought on sale, American chocolates, everything a 19-year-old boy could want. When I stepped out of the airport, the humidity and the familiar smell of rain-soaked earth hit me like a physical blow. It was real. I was home. Marco was there, looking older, a little heavier, but smiling. We embraced, and it was a bit awkward, like hugging a stranger you once knew intimately. "Where is he?" I asked, scanning the crowd, my eyes searching for the face I had only seen in pictures for 15 years. "He's waiting at home," Marco said. "Wanted to surprise you." The drive was a blur of new buildings and old landmarks. My hands were shaking. When we pulled up to our street, I saw it. It wasn't the grand house I had dreamed of, but it was a neat, freshly painted house, the nicest one on the block. The money had done this. My sacrifice had built this. I felt a surge of pride. I took a deep breath, straightened my clothes, and Marco opened the door. And there he was. My son. He was taller than I'd imagined, with broad shoulders and a haircut I'd only seen on musicians. He was standing in the middle of the living room, arms crossed, looking not at me, but at the floor. My heart felt like it was going to burst out of my chest. I dropped my bags, my hands flying to my mouth. "Raphael," I whispered. Tears were streaming down my face. "My son." I moved toward him, my arms open, ready for the embrace I had rehearsed in my mind a million times. He didn't move. He just lifted his head slowly. There was no recognition in his eyes.
No words.
Just a cool, detached curiosity. I stopped a few feet away from him, my arms still outstretched, my smile faltering. And then he spoke. The words were quiet, almost casual, but they hit me with the force of a physical assault. He looked me up and down, a stranger in his house, and asked the question that shattered my entire world into a million pieces. Who are you? In that moment, the ground disappeared from under me. It was the deepest pain I'd ever felt. If you've ever gone through a great disappointment and understand what a broken heart feels like, please like this video so I know I'm not alone on this journey. The days that followed were a waking nightmare. I was a ghost in the house I had paid for. The silence was the loudest sound I had ever heard. Raphael wouldn't look at me. He would leave a room when I entered it. He ate his meals at a friend's house. I tried to talk to him, to explain, but my words were like stones dropping into a well. They just disappeared without a ripple. Marco tried to be a bridge, but the foundation was rotten. He's just adjusting, Maria, he would say. It's been a long time. But it was more than that. I could feel it. One evening, I found bank statements stuffed in a drawer. I saw the withdrawals. Large sums of money spent on things we had never discussed. A car for Marco, expensive trips I was never told about, investments in a friend's business that had clearly gone nowhere. The money for the grand house, the money for my small business, a significant portion of it was just gone. The house we were in was heavily mortgaged. My 15 years of sacrifice hadn't secured our future. It had just funded a lifestyle I was never a part of. The betrayal was a cold, slow-moving poison. Marco had lied with every "we're so grateful" and "we're saving everything" he had ever said on the phone. And my son wasn't just a stranger. He was a monument to my absence. He didn't see me as a mother. He saw me as a bank account, an ATM that had suddenly, inconveniently, become a person. The woman who had sent the money was a hero. The woman who had returned was an intruder. I sank into a darkness, so profound I thought it would consume me. I spent my days in a small guest room, the very room that was supposed to be a temporary space before I moved into the master bedroom of my own life. I would lie in bed for hours, staring at the ceiling, replaying that moment at the door over and over again. Who are you? The question echoed in my head until it became my own.
Who was I?
I wasn't a mother. I wasn't a wife. I was a depleted resource. A fool. All my sacrifice had amounted to nothing but a hollowed-out life and a broken heart. I had no skills for the job market here. My entire adult life had been spent in the shadows, cleaning up other people's messes. I had no friends. The people I knew before I left had moved on, built their own lives. I was utterly and completely alone, stranded on the island of the life I was supposed to have. My savings were almost gone, spent on the plane ticket home, and the gifts that now sat in a corner, mocking me. The despair was a physical weight. It made it hard to breathe, hard to think. My life was over. I had given it all away, and there was nothing left for me. One rainy afternoon, when the gray sky matched the grayness in my soul, I was packing up the last of my belongings from the US, stuffing them into a box to be thrown away. At the bottom of an old suitcase, my fingers brushed against something hard and fabric-bound. I pulled it out. It was my grandmother's recipe book. A tattered, grease-stained journal, the pages yellowed and soft as cloth. She had given it to me just before I left, saying, "So you don't forget the taste of home." I had forgotten all about it. I sat on the floor and opened it. Her familiar, looping handwriting filled the pages. Recipes for sancocho, arepas, empanadas, dishes I hadn't tasted or even thought about in 15 years. As I turned the pages, the scent of cumin and old paper rose up to meet me. It was the smell of my childhood kitchen, of my grandmother humming as she rolled dough, of a time when I was not a provider or a sacrifice, but just Maria. A memory surfaced, so vivid it was almost painful. Me, a little girl, standing on a stool, my hands covered in flour, trying to copy my grandmother's quick, expert movements as she folded empanadas. She would let me make my own lopsided creations, and she would fry them up and declare them the most delicious of all. I felt a flicker of something in my chest. It wasn't hope, not yet.
It was too fragile for that.
It was smaller. It was a spark. A tiny, ember-like recognition of a person I used to be, a person who knew how to create, not just to earn. A person who had a heritage, a history that had nothing to do with Marco or Raphael. In that dusty, forgotten book was a language I still knew how to speak. It was the only thing in my life that was truly mine. That little book became my lifeline. I had almost no money left, but I took the little I had and went to the market. I bought flour, cornmeal, onions, a little bit of meat. It felt strange and wonderful to be buying ingredients for myself, not just calculating how many hours of work they represented. Back in the kitchen of the house that didn't feel like mine, I started to cook. At first, my hands were clumsy. 15 years of holding a mop handle had made them stiff. My first batch of empanadas were ugly, some of them bursting open in the hot oil. I cried out of frustration, but I didn't stop. I tried again. And again. I followed my grandmother's spidery script, her little notes in the margins. A pinch more of this. Don't be afraid of the heat. With each batch, something came back to me. The muscle memory in my hands returned. The smell of the sofrito bubbling on the stove filled the sterile house with a soul it never had. For the first time in months, the house started to smell like a home. It was my home, not theirs.
I was working for myself now.
I would wake up before dawn, while the house was quiet, and I would cook. The rhythmic chopping of vegetables, the kneading of dough, the sizzle of the oil. It became a form of meditation. It was a way to process the pain, to channel the anger and the grief into something tangible, something nourishing. It was hard, grueling work. I started selling my empanadas from a small folding table on a busy street corner. I felt so exposed, so humiliated at first. Here I was, the woman who had worked in America, now a street vendor. Some people I knew from my old life would walk by and pretend not to see me. Their pity felt worse than their judgment. But then people started to buy. They were cautious at first, but they would take a bite, and their eyes would light up. This tastes like my mother's cooking, an old man told me one day, his voice thick with emotion.
He bought 10 more to take to his family.
That was the moment everything began to shift. It wasn't just about selling food. I was selling memories. I was selling a connection to a home that so many of us, in our own ways, had lost. That old man became my first regular customer. He brought his friends. They brought their families. My little folding table started to get a line. I would talk to my customers, hear their stories. I learned about their lives, their struggles, their small joys. I was connecting with people in a way I never had before. I wasn't just a faceless provider anymore. I was Maria, the woman who made the best empanadas on the west side. One day, a young woman came to my table. She looked exhausted. She told me she was a single mother, working 2 jobs to make ends meet, and she never had time to cook a proper meal for her kids. She bought a dozen empanadas. The next week, she came back with tears in her eyes. "My son," she said, "he's such a picky eater. But he ate 3 of your empanadas and asked for more. He said it was the best thing he's ever tasted." She hugged me, right there on the street corner. In that hug, I felt a sense of purpose that all the money I had ever sent home had failed to give me. I wasn't feeding a dream of a life I couldn't be a part of. I was feeding a real child, helping a real mother. I was making a small, tangible difference. That was my first true victory. My confidence grew. I saved every penny. I moved from the folding table to a small stall in the local market. I painted a sign with my own hands, Maria's Kitchen. It felt so good to see my name on something I had built from scratch. Word of mouth was my only advertisement. People started calling me the heart of the market. They came for the food, but they stayed for the community that was building around my little stall. I was no longer the broken woman who had returned with nothing. I was a businesswoman. I was a chef. I was the center of my own small, bustling world. It was right there, with my own 2 hands, that I began to rewrite my story. I stopped being the victim and became the author of my own destiny. If my comeback story is inspiring you, subscribe to the channel to follow the next chapters and become part of this community of new beginnings. A year passed. My little market stall had become a small, beloved cafe. Maria's Kitchen was always full, the air thick with the smell of good food and the sound of happy chatter. I had my own apartment, a small, simple place that was entirely mine. I had hired 2 other women to help me, both of them with their own stories of hardship and resilience. We were a small family. I had finally found my place, not by returning to a home that no longer existed, but by building a new one from the ground up. Then one busy Tuesday afternoon he walked in.
Marco.
He looked thinner, more worried than I had ever seen him. He stood hesitantly by the door, looking out of place amidst the cheerful chaos of my cafe. He approached the counter where I was packing an order. "Maria," he said, his voice soft. I didn't stop what I was doing. I finished packing the order, handed it to the customer with a smile, and then I turned to him. "Marco. This place, that's amazing," he said, looking around. "I heard you were doing well." "I am," I said. My voice was even, calm. The frantic, desperate woman he knew was gone. He stumbled over his words, talking about how things had been difficult, how the car had broken down, how the mortgage payments were getting harder to make. It was a long, winding road that I knew was leading to one destination. He needed money.
But it was what he said next that stopped me.
"Raphael wants to see you," he said. He misses you." I looked at him, and for the first time, I felt nothing. No anger, no pain. Just a quiet, settled clarity. "Does he?" I asked. "Or does he miss the things my money could buy?" A week later, Raphael came to the cafe. He didn't come in. He waited outside, leaning against a wall, until the lunch rush was over, and I was cleaning up. He was a young man I barely knew, a stranger forged in my absence and shaped by my money. I wiped my hands on my apron and went outside to meet him. "Hi," he said, not meeting my eyes. We stood in silence for a moment. The noise of the city was all around us, but between us, there was only a vast, empty space of 15 lost years. "The cafe is nice," he said finally. "Thank you. I want to talk to you," he said, still looking at his shoes. "I'm in university now. It's expensive. I was wondering if maybe you could help." There it was, the reason for the visit. He finally looked at me then, and in his eyes, I saw a flicker of the entitlement I had come to recognize. He saw Maria's kitchen not as a testament to my struggle and rebirth, but as a new, successful source of funds. The old me would have collapsed. The old me would have opened her purse, desperate for any crumb of affection, any sign that he might finally see me as his mother.
But I was not the old me.
I looked at my son, at the life I had missed, at the man he had become, and I felt a deep, profound sadness, but it was a sadness without bitterness. It was simply the truth of what was. "No," I said. The word was quiet, but it was the heaviest thing I had ever lifted. He looked shocked, as if the possibility of that answer had never occurred to him.
"What?"
"But you're my mother." "Yes, I am," I said, and my voice was stronger now. "I am your mother, who spent 15 years scrubbing toilets, so you could have the best of everything. I am the mother who missed your first day of school, every birthday, every scraped knee, so you would never want for anything. I am the mother whose money built a house you felt you had the right to welcome me into as a stranger. And when I returned, broken and with nothing, you asked me who I was." Tears were welling in his eyes now, tears of frustration, not remorse. "I didn't understand," he stammered. "You were just a voice on the phone." "I know," I said, and the sadness in my voice was real. "I know. And that is a tragedy for both of us. But my life is no longer about sending parts of myself away in envelopes. This," I said, gesturing back at my little cafe, "this is what I have built with what was left of me. I built it for myself. And I will not break it apart to pay for the past." I reached into my apron pocket, took out a few bills, and pressed them into his hand. "Go inside," I told him. "Have lunch. The food is very good. It's the taste of a home you never knew." I turned and walked back into my cafe, leaving him standing on the sidewalk. I didn't look back. That was our final goodbye, and our first real hello. It was the moment I stopped being a ghost, and he was forced to see the woman. Today, my life is not grand, but it is full. It is filled with the warmth of my kitchen, the loyalty of my staff, and the gratitude of my customers. My legacy is not a mortgaged house or a son who wears designer clothes. My legacy is in the taste of my food, in the comfort it brings, in the community I have nurtured. I have found a peace that money could never buy. I found it not in being the mother I thought I had to be, but in becoming the woman I was always meant to be. I learned that you can give everything you have to someone, but you cannot make them value it. The only worth that truly matters is the worth you build for yourself. Today, I understand that the wounds of the past don't define who we are, but what we do with them does. I am immensely grateful that you have listened to my story this far. If it has touched you, share it with someone who might need a little light, and leave a comment with a word of strength and hope. Together, we are stronger.